This is All Out Politics, news, debate and opinion from the heart of Westminster. The Chancellor was cheered loudly in the Commons yesterday by his own Conservative MPs and again when he addressed them later at a meeting of the Backbench 1922 committee. But given the gloomy economic outlook, did his budget do enough to steer the country through the economic uncertainty we're heading into after Brexit? Well, joining me now to discuss that budget are the Labour MP, former Shadow Minister Rushanara Ali, who's also a member of the Treasury Select Committee, the Conservative MP, former Government Whip John Penrose, and the SNP's Treasury spokesperson, Alison Thewliss. What do you think, Alison Thewliss? Did this do enough? I mean, it certainly seems from the media reaction to have steadied the ship, if I could use that cliche.
Well, the Tories have a very big ship that they need to steady, with backbenchers running off and complaining about all kinds of different things. So it's not a very dramatic budget. It certainly doesn't tackle all of the issues that we're facing with Brexit. But that really is a problem for the Conservative Party rather than for the rest of us. The rest of us are worried about incomes, about wage stagnation, about the fact that goods cost more in the shops. Those are the real problems facing people around the UK today. So
you felt it was a budget for the party, but not in any sense making any real difference to the economy?
No, absolutely not. And you see that with not tackling the call for scrapping the public sector pay cap as well. You know, there should have been a commitment in there for that as well. People need to see their wages increase.
What do you think, Rushanara Ali?
Well, I think the forecasts are really worrying. It means living standards are going to go down. The uncertainty around Brexit, the arguments about whether there'll be a transition deal, whether we are going to have a deal or not, those things are affecting confidence, particularly among business. Investment's gone down. Productivity is really poor, and that is showing up in those figures. So living standards and wages are going to suffer, and we have struggled for a long time since the financial crisis. We've had austerity, and what the Chancellor his budget shows is that actually things aren't going to improve. In fact, they're going to get worse. So on the fundamentals, I think things are looking very gloomy for the Chancellor and for the country. The other things that I'm very concerned about is that the government hasn't set out any expenditure for policing and security when we've had 5 terrorist attacks in the last year.
Am I not right that would come in the local government settlement?
Well, I hope so, because in London alone we're going to lose £400 million. The Met Police Commissioner and other commissioners have highlighted the need for more investment in the police service to protect our security, and violent crime has gone up. Alongside that, you've got nothing really in there for further education, and the school's funding budget is down by £2 billion. We've seen nothing there either. So I'm very concerned about those areas.
OK, say John Penrose, he put a brave face on it, pleased Tory MPs, but didn't really do anything about underlying pretty gruesome picture.
Well, I think it's absolutely right to say that there are long-term problems which have been around now for 6 or 7 years since the financial crash, and which need long-term answers. But I think he did quite a lot towards that. There's an awful lot of stuff about investing in not just infrastructure, but also in digital, also in skills, also in roads and rail and those sorts of things. And I think those kinds of things are the bits that will change that long-term picture. They're the things that raise the economy's sort of long-term rate of revs, if you like, sort of get the engine to go a bit faster. And that's what we need to change. That's what's been not working well since about 2008, and that's what's got to alter.
Well, the big problem here is that we've got a government that hasn't given enough clarity about whether we're going to have a decent deal in the Brexit negotiations, and that uncertainty is affecting confidence.
Now, I want to come on that in a moment, but just on those measures, those economic stimuluses, preparing the country for the new technological age.
Well, I think it's always encouraging to see any government focusing on the new technological age. The problem is that it's not on a scale that's big enough to offset some of the other challenges we face as a country.
Yeah, I would agree with that. There's no mention in this budget about renewables, which is a huge industry for Scotland, huge potential there in terms of becoming a cleaner, greener economy. No mention of that at all.
But there wasn't, I mean, at the same time, the subsidies for renewables weren't withdrawn, were they? I mean,
there's been huge amounts of money taken out of those while they're subsidising things like Hinkley, which is not the direction that really we should be going in as an economy.
Now, Brexit, I mean, just looking at the sums, it does look that this is a net cost which is, setting back the economy rather than opening it up to the bright future that some Brexiteers were telling us about.
Well, the problem is, of course, that no one knows what kind of deal we're going to get yet, because it takes...
Shouldn't we know?
Well, I would love to know. Everyone would love to know, but of course it's a negotiation, so we can't just sort of magic it out of thin air. It has to be agreed by both sides, and there's 27 other EU countries who have to sign up. So we've got to get to that deal. I agree with everybody. It's got to be as fast as we can. And in the meantime, we have got to prepare. And I think it would be, I think your viewers would be pretty upset at a government that just sort of refused to put anything in place to prepare for what's going to be needed. We can do some contingency planning, and it would, I think, be irresponsible not to.
With £3 billion to prepare for Brexit that could have gone into education, could have gone into policing and health, that's what the public need to hold the government to account on. Secondly, we still don't know whether there's going to be a proper transition deal. It needs to happen fast, by Christmas, and at the latest by March. Otherwise, many businesses, particularly in the financial services, it's not going to be useful to them.
But given where we are, I mean, Labour would have spent £3 billion as well, and got to prepare first, haven't we?
We've got to prepare, but the point is that the government is all over the place on Brexit negotiations because it's actually an internal battle. There are some people in the Conservative Party who would rather crash out of the European Union without a deal, which would cost billions, more and more money to our country and our economy. And that internal wrangling and fighting in the cabinet, never mind the entire party, is deeply damaging for our economy. We need a decent deal that, and frankly, ruling out being in the customs union and single market is going to cost jobs and growth in our country.
I mean, can we now say that we've had these figures from the Chancellor that for the foreseeable future, whatever the merits in terms of taking back control, Brexit is going to be a net drag on the economy, a net negative?
No, I don't think we can say that either way at the moment. And what we've said is that there's a chunk of government spending that needs to be done to prepare for Brexit. Whether or not Brexit ends up being a boost to the economy or a drag on it will depend on the free trade deal we get, and we don't know what that is yet. It could be, if we get a really good deal, could be amazing, but we need to be prepared for it either way.
You agree?
I have no prospect of it being amazing at all. And I think the amount of money that the government is putting aside, which is dwarfing the NHS budget, really tells you all you need to know about Brexit and the disaster that is going to cause. And that is before we've exited. That is before there's the impact on household goods, which are already, butter is 12% more expensive now than it was at the point where we voted. That's absolutely ridiculous.
Well,
that's people's budgets, people's pockets, money people are spending at the shops, while their incomes are not going up, while it's predicted that there's going to be 17 years before wage growth happens. That's ridiculous.
Yeah, as far as we can
this
tell...
This is a self-inflicted harm.
I mean, we
that
know that the majority of Scots voted to remain, but as far as we can tell, there hasn't been a shift in overall public opinion in the UK.
People are going to start feeling this more and more, and they're going to start asking questions of the government as to what exactly their plan is, because it's not clear even yet what the government want to see from Brexit.
I think that's wrong. I think it is pretty clear. What is not clear yet, though, is what agreement we can reach with the other EU 27. It's all very well for Brits to sit here and say we want X and we want Y, but actually you've got to have an agreement with the other EU 27.
I mean, are you worried that people might not say, well, I've changed my mind on Brexit, but they might just say things aren't too good and I blame the government for leading us to this point?
I think that any government, it doesn't matter in what circumstances, Brexit or not, is always held accountable for the economy, whether or not they caused the problem or not. They're the people who are in charge and with their hands on the steering wheel when it happens. So every government, doesn't matter who's in charge, wants to make sure that you try and avoid recessions and rather obvious things like that.
I mean, Philip Hammond, of course, was still blaming the last Labour government, wasn't he, yesterday?
Well, I don't think the public are going to be they're not impressed with the infighting that is damaging the prospects of getting a decent deal over Brexit. And that, ultimately the test is going to be whether the government can negotiate a deal that protects our economic interests. I can't see the signs of that. People didn't vote to be poorer, as Philip Hammond himself has stated, and they expect the government to be constructive and unified in getting that deal.
But if they are turning out to be poorer, maybe Labour should say, well, actually, perhaps we should think again about leaving the European Union.
Well, we've called for a transition deal. The government, in the Florence speech, the Prime Minister said that that was important. That would enable us to be able to maintain some of the things many of the things we have at the moment. But if you look at the internal divides within the Conservative Party, actually even that is proving to be difficult. And if we don't move fast by Christmas, that is going to cost jobs.
But if those divisions go on, then Labour might win the election. if there is an election because of Conservative divisions. And I'm just saying, what is the point that people just say, look, this is costing us a lot. Perhaps we ought to think again about whether it's a good idea.
I'm a passionate pro-European. My constituency depends on us being in the European Union. We have the financial services in Tower Hamlets, in Canary Wharf, and we're surrounded by the City of London. 7 million jobs in the UK are powered by the financial services alone. It is in our interest to look at what will protect jobs and growth. That's our focus. And also rights. So that's why we've been fighting for a transition deal, and we want a deal that will protect our interests, and that's what we've got to focus on.
John Penrose, do you think you need to come up with a good news story about Brexit quite soon in political terms? I appreciate that people might still stand by how they voted in the referendum.
Well, I think that the entire process is locked into an Article 50 timetable. We don't have very much choice about that. It's what Article 50 designs, and whether or not we like it or not, it is what it is. So I think that you can try and the spin doctors can try and spin things one way or another, but actually the thing which I think will make the difference is the fundamental, which is, are we trying to get the best deal? Are we trying to get the best free trade deal in particular, not just the exit deal, but the ongoing relationship? Because we want a good ongoing relationship with Europe, and I suspect that's something which all three of us would agree, even though we might disagree about the details.
Not everybody in your party cares for that, actually, and they'd rather crash out, regardless of the consequences on the British people,
I think
because of an ideological obsession of taking back control, and that is deeply damaging for our economy.
I think you need to look at the log in your own eye before you worry about the mote in someone else's. The Labour Party is far from united on this at all.
Your party's in government, and they have to get
Let's talk about the housing question.
300,000
homes a year. Is that going to happen?
Yes, it should now. I mean, it won't happen tomorrow, but we will need to sort of build up to it.
I mean, when will it happen by?
Well, I think Philip Hammond was saying we will build up to it over the course of the next 3 or 4 years. So you need to increase. You've got to increase capacity in the construction industry to actually deliver this lump of extra homes. We haven't built this many since about 1973, so it's not a small target we're aiming at here. And it isn't a simple thing that you can just change one thing. You've got to change planning, you've got to change finance.
What has he changed, in fact, other than stating it? The main money has gone on the forgiveness of stamp duty. What's he actually done to stimulate the housing
the thing which
market?
I'm most excited about, and which I've been calling for some time, is changes to planning laws to allow what is called urban densification, which is a very boring name, but basically means you can build up rather than out in town centres and in city centres. Not huge, great big tower blocks, but sort of 4 or 5 stories high, the sorts of things you find on Regency terraces, and that allows much greater densities. It allows people to live close to work. It's much greener, and it means that you use better use of the existing infrastructure.
What does he do to encourage that? Yes,
he's promised that he's going to allow that. We're going to be changes to the planning laws. I think that Sajid Javid is going to be following up with a statement to fill in the detail.
Scotland, I think I'm right in saying, is still depopulating. So you.
Well, we're doing everything that we can do to increase population, and Brexit is a big risk to that as well. We hear people are
leaving, do you?
Brexit is the biggest threat to depopulation, because EU citizens, who are a big part of the population, who are there, who are earning, who are paying into the economy, they are starting to leave because of the messages from the UK government. They are made to feel unwelcome, and I hear that from constituents all the time.
So do you think that the housing market across the UK was stimulated sufficiently yesterday?
No. I think a lot of the things that Hammond has done is to deal with a problem of London and a problem of the cost of living in London. Because if you look at Scotland, the average house price in Scotland is £145,000, entirely different to the situation in England. And most people in Scotland won't pay land and buildings transaction tax in Scotland, because it's a different, separate system in Scotland, because most first-time buyers buy at a rate under that £145,000 threshold.
So what do you think he should have done about housing yesterday?
He needs to build more social rented housing, because he didn't mention really at all the value of social rented housing in this country. It's fine if people want to buy. If people want to buy, they should be supported to do so. But for lots of people, social rented housing and certainty in that rent and certainty in those tenancies is really important, and that's what we've done in Scotland. I mean,
you say it's about London, but actually in London there are very few one-bedroom homes for less than 300,000 anyway.
That's right. I think that the point Alison makes about social housing is absolutely vital, whether in London or elsewhere. When you look at living standards going down, wages, pressure on wages, actually there are many people who will not be able to get on the property ladder, and the alternative is private rental accommodation, which is very expensive. So the government does need to shed more light on the social housing dimension as well as affordable housing.
You're disappointed he didn't lift the constraints on local government to build houses.
I would agree with Rushanara and with Alison that we absolutely need to do more on social housing. I think that just by building 300,000 homes a year, you start to just increase the supply of housing and therefore reduce the cost of all tenures. It's not just for rent or to buy; it's also for social. But we need more boxes.
But why not?
And then start worrying about what sort of stuff
you borrow more to build.
Well, I think he's done that to an extent as well. That's part of his package as well, so that is in there. But I think the important thing is, when I was campaigning for the change to the planning laws, lined up pretty much all the, certainly the English affordable housing organisations, the social landlords behind this, because they have both the balance sheet but also the financial heft and the skills to deliver on this building programme if they've got the sites in the town centres.
OK, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you all very much indeed.